I'm here to give a little introduction about interdisciplinary research in the context of positive animal welfare, so that you don't get completely lost for the coming 2 days. So my name is Irene. I'm the Science Communication Coordinator of Cost Action Lift and also Working Group 4 leader, but also at the same time writer of this book, Bridging Research Disciplines to Advance Animal Welfare Science. And the main conclusion of this is that we need at least some basic knowledge and skills in interdisciplinary research to do animal welfare science. That's why I give a brief introduction to this topic. I'll start with the aims of this training school, at least the aims for me. You might have the aim to go here for sightseeing and partying, but my aim is to support LIFT members and sub-working groups with the interdisciplinary collaboration on positive animal welfare. And also, of course, to increase knowledge and skills for you and to strengthen the interdisciplinary network that we have in LIFT with all these 300 members. So now you're still fresh, hopefully, and listening, at least for the first 5 minutes. I'll take the opportunity to directly give the take-home messages. So the first thing is that interdisciplinary studies is an education in itself. It's an MSc degree that you can get. And so we shouldn't assume it's just something that just automatically, naturally flows without doing any effort or without knowing anything about it. And something that is not to be underestimated, something that you know, write in a research proposal and say just for the fun, we'll do some interdisciplinary research, but the consequences of this might be that it needs to be prepared properly. So if you have to do interdisciplinary research, for example, because the funder demands it or because your employer wants to do so, then you have to prepare it properly and professionally like you do with any other scientific discipline. Then if you don't have to do interdisciplinary research, then I dare to go so far to say only do it when you're passionate about it, or at least when you're at some level a reasonably good communicator. If you prefer to sit in your office with the door closed, well, me, I do, and just don't speak to other people and just do your own thing, then maybe this is not for, then interdisciplinary research is not for you, but then you of course always have the chance to appoint someone else to do this, and that's in some cases better. The main message from this book is also, don't try to do everything yourself, get an expert for the things that you're not knowledgeable about, instead of just doing something, getting it from the internet or finding out some tools and that's it. So, the rest of the presentation will be to give a bit more background about this. To know about interdisciplinary research, we need to know a little bit about the basic framework of how science is structured. We have, of course, the main scientific branches, natural science, life science, and formal science. We fit mostly into natural science, most people here. Then within natural science, you have some categories like life science and physics. Also, most of us here fits in life science. And then within this life science, we have disciplines, for example, biology and neuroscience, genetics. And within biology, you have many different subdisciplines. And of these subdisciplines, you have, for example, ethology, zoology, or ecology. And animal welfare is a recent subdiscipline under biology. So that's where we more or less sit. And an interdisciplinarity more or less goes horizontally across all those disciplines, and with the main aim to fuse different, not necessarily different disciplines, but methods or techniques of these disciplines. So I had to give a definition. I think it's important. I'll read it for you. So one definition is that interdisciplinary research is a mode of research in which individual scientists or a team of scientists integrate information, data, techniques, tools, perspective, concepts, or theories, aspects of a discipline, from two or more disciplines or body of specialized knowledge, with the objective to advance fundamental understanding to solve problems where solutions are beyond the scope of a single discipline or area of research practice. So something that you can't solve with just one discipline, you can use interdisciplinary research to tackle this problem. And interdisciplinarity is a word that is used as a kind of umbrella term for multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. In the past, there was also the word cross-disciplinary use, so that this word interdisciplinary, the use of it, has changed several times over the past decade, let's say it this way. To give a bit of background of these three different types, because they are very often mixed up in research when researchers don't know about the foundations of interdisciplinary research. So multidisciplinary is that you have more than one subdiscipline or discipline or subdiscipline working on the same problem, but they both work from their own perspective, they have their own analysis and their own outcome. So for example, you have a study, you measure behavior, or someone measures behavior, someone measures physiology, you can even publish it in 2 different journals, and but you both contribute to the same topic on animal welfare. Then for interdisciplinary, it requires that the two or more disciplines work together. And together create something that is more than the sum of its parts. So they create something which otherwise couldn't have been achieved. For example, if an engineer and an ethologist work together to create an algorithm to detect, automatically detect animal behavior, it gives one outcome, an algorithm for animal behavior, detecting animal behavior, which couldn't have been made only by the ethologist or only by the engineer. They need to work together to come to it, to together address the solution. And then transdisciplinary research is when non-academic stakeholders get involved in the process as well. And in the ideal situation, there's an iteration between the scientists and the non-academic stakeholders, where, for example, if you have a project where you want to build a new kind of, develop a new kind of farming system, and you do this in collaboration with the farmers. So you sit around the table, the engineers, the ethologists, the nutritionists maybe, and the farmers. And the farmers, they will say, this is what is needed in a farming system. And then the engineer starts developing, and then they feed back to the farmers and saying, is this what you wanted? And the farmers may say no or yes. And this way, over time, it's a collaboration between them. Does anything need to be solved? Oh. Ah, okay. Okay. So another aspect of interdisciplinarity, which is one of the main basic principles, is that it relates to complex issues. Another definition of interdisciplinarity is, it's more or less the same as the first one, but it specifically mentions that it's to create a holistic view or common understanding of a complex issue, question, or problem. And another definition also said that it addresses a topic that is too broad or too complex to be dealt with adequately by a single discipline or profession. Now, what is complex? And this is one of the things, maybe Chart will raise it tomorrow, where language may create confusion between people working together. Because if you think of complex, you might have an idea like, oh, something that's difficult. But actually in interdisciplinarity, complex is not a generic term for something difficult. It is a system that is too difficult to understand because it has lots of varied parts, both nonlinear, asymmetrical relationship combined to produce a self-organizing pattern of behavior that takes on a life of its own. And it cannot be fully predicted by the separate parts of the system. So a very good example of a complex system is an ecosystem. Because an ecosystem has many different parts. If you just take one part of it, you can't predict what the whole ecosystem is going to do. Another example is the brain. The brain is also a complex system in itself. Climate change is another one. If you just take CO2, you can't predict the whole climate change for the next years. So these kind of problems are complex problems. And within complex problems, you have something which is called wicked problems. And wicked problems is also another word that can lead to, different concepts. So it's not some kind of witchcraft with a wicked boiling of problems, but it's actually a complex and multifaceted issue that have no single solution and are perceived differently by stakeholders through contrasting views. And there's a whole list of 10 points which characterize wicked problems. I won't give the whole list of 10 points, but the main conclusion, the main sum up is it has no definite description, it has no definite solution, it's strongly stakeholder dependent, and there's little consensus about what it is and how it should be solved. Now that sounds a bit like animal welfare. We don't have a clear definition, we don't have a clear solution, It's strongly stakeholder dependent because it is very much driven by society, and there's little consensus about how to solve it or what it is. Now, according to interdisciplinary research, complex problems and wicked problems require interdisciplinary approach. So by nature, animal welfare needs an interdisciplinary approach if you really address animal welfare in itself. Now, animal welfare from its origin is already interdisciplinary. Actually, if you read the old literature, and especially the publications that write about the history or the development of animal welfare science, the earlier researchers, they already said, like, this new discipline is forming. They were talking about animal welfare science. A new discipline is forming out of ethology, veterinary science, and zoology. And some mention also physiology and immunology. So it's from its base, it was already a fusion of different disciplines. Of course, nowadays we have many more disciplines and sub-disciplines which are fused into animal welfare science. But these top three mostly are almost always there, actually, even though we are not so conscious anymore that we're actually working with different disciplines within animal welfare science. So what about positive animal welfare? Animal welfare, it is also a complex and a wicked problem. And that's why we have lived. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the case, almost. There's no definite description. Of course, Working Group 1 has now come up with a definition, but I assume that if you ask any one of the Working Group 1 members who have made the definition and ask if it's definite, they will say, no, it's not definite. It can still change according to how the knowledge that we further develop within lived. There's also no definite solution. It's strongly stakeholder dependent, and there's little consensus about it. There's even several papers written about how little consensus there is about positive animal welfare, which was also one of the main reasons to start up lived. Now, what is different in positive animal welfare compared to animal welfare is that we really need techniques to explore mental states. Of course, if we look back in the past of animal welfare science, it started off, luckily now a while ago, with more like veterinary base. If the animal is healthy, then it has good welfare. And for long it was used like this. Later on, of course, we know it's not just if the animal is healthy, we need more than just veterinary science, we need to also need more about her emotional states. So the more the new knowledge grew about what animal welfare is, the more also different disciplines came in. So that's why also at this stage, when there's such a focus on the mental experience of the animals, when we speak about positive animal welfare, we need to integrate disciplines that are relevant techniques for studying mental states, such as neuroscience, psychology, ethics. We can also learn a lot from the human field of positive psychology. And of course, these were already a bit present, but to really give a push to positive animal welfare science, we need those kind of disciplines. And that's why in LIFT we also have been emphasizing on getting people from those disciplines within the cost action. Now, if interdisciplinary research is so important in animal welfare science, then why is it not in every project? So one reason is that we can, of course, work on a narrowed down topic, which is normal in science. You want to have a solution for one specific problem. You don't have to always have the whole complete view. So that's completely fine. Then it might be also because of a lack of knowledge and our skill, and that's bad. You know, that's something that could have been prevented by educating researchers on how to do interdisciplinary research and how to do it properly. And then the third one is disappointment or frustration, or didn't know how to word it politely, being completely fed up with interdisciplinary research because of experiences with previous projects. I see some people nodding. And then why this disappointment and frustration? Because many interdisciplinary projects are done without the proper knowledge and skills. People don't always choose to do this voluntarily. And then it leads to very challenging, especially socially challenging situations that may fail to reach the goal or fail to reach it efficiently. maybe, I'm sure that later during these 2 days we will hear some examples from practice, even today, about working with statisticians and tomorrow as well. So some of these challenges, I just give a highlight. I'm sure that the others will present also more about the challenges, but also maybe opportunities. Communication is one of the main difficulties in interdisciplinary research. We all come from our own different background with our own little culture that we create in our scientific field. And when you put those together, it's can create some sparks of disagreement, because everyone thinks that they are right, because it's their science, you know, and they are the expert in their field, and everyone thinks they're expert in the field. But then if you combine different fields with completely different techniques, they might disagree about what is right and what is wrong, especially when working with social scientists, where the statistics, for example, is more qualitative, and most of you are quantitative researchers which are focused on data, and data is it. And then if you look at what social scientists produce, it might be at first like a shock, like, wow, you can just, you know, put some post-its on the wall and produce this as science. So that's why another point is that you need to have an understanding of the other's work to know what they're doing and why they're doing and how what the scientific methods are, to get the understanding instead of a shock about other techniques. It also may lead to polarization around the needs and priorities. For example, data scientists may focus on wanting as much data points as possible, whereas animal welfare scientists may have a priority on maintaining the animal's welfare, especially when it's invasive samples and you don't want to take too many samples. And then, well, we'll hear about it later today. Then, if you do transdisciplinary research, you have stakeholder involvement. And then the stakeholder is a main player in the project, but may have different interests. You know, you have written your research proposal, the objective is going this direction, and you invite the stakeholders, and they are agreeing, and it's all going well, and then the stakeholders, they come to the workshop, and they say, no, we want to go this way, and they don't want to bend. And then it's like, well, do you either choose to go with the stakeholders and completely move your projects around, which the funder might not even allow, or do you just say, okay, that was interesting, and then we ignore the stakeholders and we just go with what we were planning to do, which happens in most of the cases, because, you know, this is what you got funding for, these are your objectives, you have to reach the objectives, and if the stakeholders go completely different direction and say, no, this is not important, we want to discuss something else, then you are in between. Of course, if you have a project, it's often time-bound, and especially when disciplines feed into each other's work, like animal welfare scientists collecting data and then giving it to the engineers or statisticians to calculate algorithms or whatever, then there is a timeline that needs to be followed. And we know if when working with animals, it doesn't always go according to the planning. It usually takes more time, and then you're actually delaying the opportunities for the other discipline to start working. And last but not least, there might be an imbalance in gains. For example, from the shared collaboration, you'll get a major publication. And then where to publish it? Will it be published in your discipline, or in the other's discipline, or in a multidisciplinary journal? But multidisciplinary journals often have a lower impact factor. So somewhere someone seems to lose. And here there is, at least in animal welfare science, it's how to say, the discipline that comes in as an addition is often disadvantaged, and this leads to disappointment with doing projects because they put in their effort, but they don't get out proper scientific outcomes or proper scientific credit for it. So, then how to overcome this? I think most will be, I don't want to take away any of the information from the other speakers, so I'll have only 2 more slides, very short about this. What we can do, the first thing, as I already mentioned, if you're required to do interdisciplinary research, then get the experts in for the topic. Instead of thinking, well, we all do animal welfare, but we have slightly different backgrounds. You know, Boris he has some veterinary background, and Pierre has some ecology background, and that will be enough. You know, we sit together for some coffee and we talk a bit about it, and that will be interdisciplinary. But then really when you want to do something properly, like using neuroscience, psychology, it's better to just get the expert. And as mentioned, if you're not good at communicating, it's even better to find someone in the team who is good at it, and to make this person in charge of this kind of the process. Also, you have to plan in the time and effort it takes to do this, and not just take it on as an add-on that it will come in between, you know, on top. But it is something that is really on top of the other research, as that needs to be planned properly. Okay, and if you don't need to do any interdisciplinary research, then consider, because there are definitely benefits of doing interdisciplinary research. As mentioned, it is the way that is needed to solve complex issues. And if we want to get further with animal welfare science, we have to, in the end, use an interdisciplinary technique. But it needs to be planned well, and the right people, if you feel capable of taking on such a task, then it has great potential. But you need to be aware of your skills, of the team skills, and the conditions for it, and if the objective is suitable for it. So there are some techniques in interdisciplinary science that can help with getting the synthesis right. Synthesis is another term in interdisciplinary research which is used a lot, because it's the main thing to fuse the disciplines. In the book from Menke and Keestra, it's called An Introduction to Interdisciplinary Science. They explain how to start with interdisciplinary research, and they put a lot of focus on the orientation phase. Now, what the orientation phase is more or less sitting around the table and speaking about the objective. And normally you would also do this, but here it gets much more attention that at least everyone has the same common ground before even starting. By the way, I definitely recommend this book. It's a small book, also cheap, but also a sample of it with the main information almost is online on ResearchGate as PDF. I could even send it afterwards, after the course. Another method is team building. For example, by mutual learning, shared activities, site visits to get to know each other better and to increase the communication. And for some, this may seem not scientific. You know, why are we doing this? We're wasting our time. We want to do science. We have so many things to do. Why should we go together for dinner or something? But it is a very important aspect of the science itself to create a better understanding of each other's research, but also of each other's ways of thinking. And what I mentioned earlier, that there needs to be a mutual understanding of each other's discipline, at least to some extent a bit. For example, by sharing about what the other does, there are several techniques about how to overcome also language issues and things with terminology, what we heard about complex and wicked problems that may create different concepts in people's minds. And the same is with animal welfare even, that when you ask people what's animal welfare, they may all give a completely different answer. So if you have a team, you have to work on team building, but it's also good to have clear roles. And even though in research, you know, everyone is more or less friends and you don't really have a hierarchy, it is really important to set leadership roles and to say like, okay, of course, if you have a research project, someone is the principal investigator and might by nature have a leading role. But if you are all on a common ground because there's funders who, you know, puts people together, then it's good to assign really a role who is the one who manages the process. Especially because it's possible that there will be some social conflicts, and then it's good that someone can interfere. So overall, good communication doesn't come by itself, and the main conclusion of this talk is that the process requires work as well. And it can give a lot of benefits, but it needs some work to get there, and people need to be prepared for this. So what we do now, favorite quote. 1% of the whole team is more crucial than 100% of myself, by the famous marathon runner. Yesterday we had a marathon here in Milan, if you have wondered why there were so many people in running clothes. Just to check it. Okay. Exercise.